My name is Dalton Richardson, 68 years old, and keeping quiet about inheriting Bluebell Ranch saved me from the worst betrayal of my life. Catherine, my beloved wife of 35 years, left me this 1,700-acre paradise when cancer took her. Our son Jake married Amanda last spring in a ceremony that set off all my internal alarms. Something felt wrong about her, but I stayed silent about my inheritance. Thank God I did, because just 1 week later, Jake invited me to dinner with what he called a financial advisor. Where are you watching from today? Hit subscribe if you've ever had that gut feeling that protected you from someone who only wanted what you had, not who you were. I spent most of my working life as a high school principal in Bozeman, Montana. 32 years of helping shape young minds before I retired at 62. By then, Catherine was already sick, pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave her 8 months, but my Catherine was a fighter. She held on for almost 2 years before she finally let go. That was 3 years ago, but the ache in my chest still feels fresh some mornings when I wake up alone in our bed. Catherine and I met in college at Montana State. I was studying education, and she was pursuing animal science. Her family had owned Bluebell Ranch for 4 generations, raising cattle and horses on some of the most beautiful land God ever created. When we married, her parents welcomed me into the family, though I knew some of her relatives wondered what Catherine saw in a future school teacher with no ranching background. Throughout our 35 years together, Catherine divided her time between helping me raise our son Jake and working the ranch alongside her father and brothers. She had ranching in her blood. I'd help during summers and weekends, but I never fully got the hang of it. Still, I loved the land almost as much as I loved her. When Catherine's parents passed, the ranch went to her and her 2 brothers. Then, in a cruel twist of fate, both her brothers died within a year of each other 5 years back, one from a heart attack, the other in a tractor accident. That left Catherine as the sole owner of Bluebell Ranch and its 1,700 acres of pristine Montana landscape. The property stretches from rolling pastures, perfect for cattle grazing, to pine forests that climb up the foothills of the Bridger Mountains. There's a crystal-clear stream that winds through the property, 3 natural ponds, and views that take your breath away at sunrise. Developers had been trying to get their hands on it for years, offering amounts that made my head spin. Last offer I heard was close to $15 million, but to Catherine, the land was priceless. When she got sick, we had long talks about what would happen after she was gone. I assumed she would split everything between me and Jake, our only child, but Catherine was adamant. "The ranch goes to you, Dalton," she said, her voice weaker, but her mind still sharp as ever. "Jake has never shown interest in this place. He chose the city, and that's fine. But I won't have developers chopping up land that my great-grandfather protected with his life. You understand this place, even if you don't think you do." I protested, telling her that Jake should get his fair share, but she was unmovable. "Jake will get money and some property, but the ranch stays whole, with someone who will protect it. That's you, Dalton. Promise me." And so I promised. When Catherine passed, the entire ranch became mine, along with the responsibility to preserve it. Jake received a substantial inheritance too, $500,000 and a vacation property in Colorado that Catherine's family had owned. It seemed fair to me, especially since Jake had never shown any interest in ranching or even visiting Montana more than once every few years. Despite suddenly becoming the owner of property worth millions, I kept living exactly as I always had. The old ranch house with its weathered porch and creaking floorboards was home. I still drove Catherine's father's 1990 Ford pickup truck. The ranch hands who'd worked the property for decades stayed on, and we maintained the operations just as Catherine would have wanted. Jake, our only son, had taken a completely different path in life. From an early age, he showed more interest in numbers than nature. He was always smart as a whip, graduated top of his class, and headed straight to Northwestern University for a business degree. After college, he landed a job at an investment firm in Chicago and quickly climbed the corporate ladder. When he was younger, Jake would spend summers at the ranch, riding horses and helping with easy chores. Catherine tried to nurture his connection to the family land, but as he got older, his visits became shorter and less frequent. The last few years, he'd only come home for Christmas, staying just long enough to open presents before heading back to the city. I tried not to take it personally. That's just who Jake was, a city boy through and through. Our relationship remained cordial but distant. Monthly phone calls, occasional emails, and those brief holiday visits were the extent of our connection. Then Jake met Amanda at his investment firm. According to him, she worked in client relations and had a background in art history from some expensive private college back east. Jake started mentioning her in every phone call. Amanda this, Amanda that. After just 3 months, he flew her out to Montana to meet me. I still remember the first time she stepped out of Jake's rental car. Tall, blonde, and dressed like she was heading to a photo shoot rather than a working ranch. Designer jeans that probably cost more than a month's grocery bill, and not a speck of dirt on her white leather boots. She was beautiful, no doubt about that, and charming in a practiced sort of way. "Mr. Richardson," she said, extending a manicured hand. "Jake has told me so much about this amazing property. I can't wait to see everything." Over the next 2 days, Amanda asked countless questions about the ranch, but something felt off. She wasn't interested in its history or natural beauty. Instead, she wanted to know about property lines, mineral rights, and what I thought the land was worth. When we drove around the property, she kept commenting on what beautiful home sites certain areas would make. "I bet developers would pay a fortune for parcels with these mountain views," she said, in what she probably thought was a casual tone. Jake seemed oblivious to the undertones, proudly showing her around like he was the one who had built the place. When they left, I felt uneasy, but told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe city folks just talked differently about land. 6 months after they met, Jake called to announce they were engaged. The wedding was set for spring, just 3 months away. It seemed rushed to me, but Jake insisted they were completely in sync and ready to start their life together. "She's the one, Dad," he said, sounding genuinely happy. "You'll be my best man, right?" How could I say no? Despite my reservations about Amanda, I wanted to support my son. If he saw something in her that I didn't, who was I to judge? Still, something in my gut told me to be cautious. Catherine always said I had good instincts about people. As the wedding approached, I decided to keep the full extent of my inheritance quiet until I got to know Amanda better. Jake and Amanda's wedding was held at an upscale hotel in downtown Chicago with a view of Lake Michigan. The ceremony and reception probably cost more than what I made in 5 years as a school principal. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, a 10-piece orchestra, and floral arrangements bigger than my truck. Nothing like the simple church wedding Catherine and I had all those years ago. I felt out of place in my rented tuxedo, surrounded by Amanda's friends from the art world and Jake's colleagues from the financial district. Everyone seemed to be talking about vacation homes, stock portfolios, and their latest luxury purchases. I nursed a single glass of whiskey and tried to make polite conversation. Amanda's parents, the Prestons, were cut from the same cloth as their daughter. Her father, Harold, was a corporate attorney who spent the first 10 minutes of our conversation explaining the difference between million-dollar and billion-dollar deals as if I couldn't grasp the concept. Her mother, Diane, kept dropping names of celebrities she claimed to know personally. "We're just thrilled that Jake is joining our family," Diane said, looking me up and down. "Amanda tells us your late wife's family had quite a bit of property in Montana. Such an investment opportunity these days with all the wealthy tech people looking for private retreats." Before I could respond, Harold jumped in. "You know, land banking is one of the smartest moves in today's economy. If you ever decide to liquidate those assets, I know several excellent brokers." Throughout the evening, I overheard snippets of conversations that made my skin crawl. Amanda's college friends discussing the Richardson family ranch and how Amanda had scored big time. One of them even mentioned something about Amanda having real estate development plans. During a quiet moment before the reception, Jake and I had a father-son talk in a small sitting room off the main hall. He seemed genuinely happy, if a bit overwhelmed by the extravagance around us. "Dad, I know this isn't your scene," he said, straightening his bow tie in the mirror. "Thanks for being here and supporting us." For a brief moment, I considered telling him everything about the ranch then and there. I opened my mouth to start the conversation, but then Catherine's voice echoed in my memory. "Protect what we built from those who haven't earned it." I remembered how she'd warned me that wealth could change people, how she'd seen it happen in her own extended family. I thought about Amanda's questions about property values and Harold Preston's talk of liquidating assets. Every instinct told me to keep quiet. "I'm proud of you, son," I said instead. "Your mother would be too." Jake's expression softened at the mention of Catherine. "I miss her, Dad. I wish she could have met Amanda." I just nodded, unsure if Catherine would have approved of this match. As we rejoined the celebration, I noticed how Jake's attitude toward me had subtly shifted over the past few months. His calls had become more frequent, but always included questions about family assets and whether I had updated any estate planning since Catherine's death. During my wedding toast, I carefully navigated around any mention of inheritance or the ranch. I spoke about love, commitment, and building a life together through hard work and mutual respect, values Catherine and I had lived by. While the crowd seemed underwhelmed by my simple speech, Jake at least appeared moved. Later in the evening, Amanda cornered me by the bar, her fourth or fifth champagne in hand. "Dalton," she said, dropping the Mr. Richardson she'd used until now. "Jake mentioned that Catherine's family property passed to her before she died. I'm curious about how all that works legally. Did it transfer directly to Jake afterward?" The directness of her question caught me off guard, but years of handling difficult parents as a principal had taught me how to deflect without lying. "Catherine made sure everything was taken care of," I said vaguely. "She was always very thorough." Amanda's eyes narrowed slightly. "Of course, but Jake seems confused about some of the details. Perhaps we could all sit down with our financial advisors when you visit Chicago next." "Perhaps," I said, spotting Jake across the room and excusing myself. On the flight back to Montana the next day, I couldn't shake the growing sense of unease. The ranch hands noticed my distraction when I returned. "Everything all right, boss?" asked Earl, our foreman who'd worked the land for 30 years. "Just wedding festivities," I replied, not wanting to voice my suspicions out loud. Takes a lot out of a man my age. But as I settled back into ranch life, Catherine's words kept repeating in my mind. "Protect what we built." The calls started the very next day after I returned home from the wedding. Jake, checking in to see if I'd made it back safely, which seemed normal enough until the conversation shifted. "So, Dad, I was thinking about Mom's paperwork," he said casually. "Do you have copies of all the property deeds and titles? Amanda and I are organizing our files, and we thought it would be good to have everything in order." "I have what I need," I replied carefully. "Don't worry about all that now. Focus on enjoying being newlyweds." But the calls kept coming. Every day that week, Jake would find some reason to bring up property documents, tax assessments, or family assets. Each time, I gave non-committal answers and changed the subject. On Thursday morning, I was surprised by a visitor. A woman in a sleek black SUV pulled up to the ranch house and introduced herself as Meredith Wilson from Elite Mountain Properties. "I understand the family is considering options for this beautiful property," she said with a practiced smile. "I'd be happy to provide a free market assessment." "I'm afraid you've been misinformed," I told her firmly. "This ranch isn't for sale now or any time in the foreseeable future." Her smile faltered. "Oh, I was told by a family member that. Well, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding." After she left, I called Earl into my office, the small room off the kitchen that had served as Catherine's ranch management headquarters. "Earl, has anyone been asking questions about Bluebell? Anyone coming around when I was in Chicago?" Earl shifted uncomfortably. "Well, now that you mention it, there was a fella a couple weeks back. Said he was a friend of Jake's, doing some kind of real estate research project. Asked a lot of questions about acreage, water rights, how many cattle we run. I didn't tell him much. Seemed off to me." My stomach tightened. Did he leave a name or card? Nope, but he was driving a fancy car with Chicago plates. That afternoon, I received another concerning piece of information. My friend Thomas, who worked at the county records office, called to let me know someone had requested copies of all property records associated with Bluebell Ranch. Thought you should know, Dalton, Thomas said. Wasn't sure if this was something you authorized. Guy said he was representing the Richardson family interests. I thanked Thomas for the heads up and immediately called my attorney, William Garrett, who had handled Catherine's estate. Bill, I need to make sure everything's locked down tight, I explained after filling him in on my concerns. Can someone challenge Catherine's will or try to force a sale of the property? The will is solid, Dalton, Bill assured me. Catherine was very clear about her wishes, but it might be worth reviewing everything, given what you're telling me. And you might want to consider updating your own estate plans. We arranged to meet the following day. Before hanging up, Bill added something that sent a chill through me. One more thing, Dalton. Be careful about signing anything, even if it seems harmless. There have been cases where elderly parents are pressured into property transfers or guardianship arrangements that essentially give adult children control over assets. I'm not elderly, I protested. I'm only 68 and perfectly capable. Of course, Bill said quickly. But the courts sometimes see things differently, especially if someone is pushing a narrative about cognitive decline or inability to manage large assets. After hanging up, I sat on the porch, swing Catherine and I had shared for decades, watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. Could Jake really be plotting something against me? My own son? The thought was almost too painful to consider. That evening, as if on cue, Jake called again. This time, his tone was different, brighter, more energetic. Great news, Dad. Amanda and I are coming to visit next week. We thought it would be nice to spend some time at the ranch, maybe discuss the future a bit. That's wonderful, I said, trying to match his enthusiasm while my suspicions deepened. When should I expect you? We'll fly in Wednesday morning. And Dad, let's have a nice dinner out Thursday night. My treat. I have something important to discuss with you. After we hung up, I sat at Catherine's old desk and pulled out a small leather journal she had kept. Flipping through her neat handwriting, I found what I was looking for: notes she had made about Jake's reaction when she told him he wouldn't be inheriting the ranch directly. Jake seemed disappointed, but understanding when I explained my decision. She had written, he admitted he has no interest in ranching and would likely sell to developers. Confirmed I'm making the right choice leaving Bluebell to Dalton. The next day, I met with Bill at his office in Bozeman. We spent 3 hours reviewing every document related to Catherine's estate and my ownership of the ranch. Bill also helped me prepare a durable power of attorney, naming him, not Jake, as my representative should I become incapacitated. Just as a precaution, he said. And Dalton, I'd recommend recording any important conversations you have with Jake and Amanda during this visit. Montana is a one-party consent state for recordings. He gave me a small digital recorder that I could keep in my pocket. Again, just as a precaution. On Wednesday morning, I watched Jake's rental car, a brand new Lincoln Navigator, pull up the long driveway to the ranch house. I took a deep breath and stepped onto the porch to welcome my son and his new wife, the digital recorder, safely tucked into my pocket. Jake and Amanda arrived bearing gifts: expensive whiskey, gourmet food baskets, and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than all the clothes currently in my closet combined. Their enthusiasm seemed forced, especially Amanda's, who kept exclaiming over the rustic charm of the ranch house while her eyes calculated values. I noticed immediately that both of them were dressed in what must have been extremely expensive clothes. Jake had never cared much about fashion, but now he was wearing a watch I recognized from magazine ads as costing upward of $10,000. Amanda's handbag alone probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. Dad, you look great, Jake said, hugging me with unusual vigor. Doesn't he look great, Amanda? Still strong as an ox. Absolutely, she agreed with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. The country life clearly agrees with you. Over coffee in the kitchen, the same worn but comfortable space where our family had gathered for decades, Jake casually mentioned that he'd taken a temporary sabbatical from his job to explore new opportunities. The firm was understanding, he explained. With Amanda's background in client relations and my investment experience, we're looking at some exciting ventures together. That sounds wonderful, I said, watching Amanda's perfectly manicured nails drum against the old wooden table. What kind of ventures? Actually, that's part of what we wanted to discuss with you, Amanda jumped in. But not now. We have a special dinner planned for tomorrow night. We've made reservations at the Granary. The Granary was the most expensive restaurant in the area, known for catering to wealthy tourists and part-time residents with vacation homes. Not the kind of place I'd ever choose for myself. That's very kind, I said. But there's no need for fancy restaurants. I'm happy to grill some steaks right here. No, Dad. We insist, Jake said firmly. We're celebrating new beginnings. The next day passed, with Jake and Amanda taking suspiciously detailed interest in the ranch operations. Jake had never shown this level of curiosity about breeding schedules or grazing rotations before. Amanda took countless photos, particularly of the sections with the best views or development potential. Earl caught my eye during their tour of the eastern pastures, giving me a look that said he understood exactly what was happening. When Jake and Amanda walked ahead, he murmured, "Boss, something ain't right with those two. They're measuring things." By 6 o'clock, we were headed to the Granary in Jake's rental car. I had dressed in my best clothes, a simple suit I kept for special occasions, though I felt underdressed next to Jake's tailored outfit and Amanda's cocktail dress. The restaurant was all stone fireplaces, antler chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing mountain views. As the host led us to our table, I noticed a third-place setting. "Are we expecting someone else?" I asked. Jake and Amanda exchanged glances. "Just a friend who's helping us with some planning," Jake said vaguely. "He'll join us for dessert." Throughout the appetizers and main course, conversation remained superficial. Jake and Amanda took turns complimenting me on how well I'd maintained the ranch, asking about my health, and reminiscing about Catherine in ways that seemed designed to evoke emotion rather than genuine remembrance. As the server cleared our plates, Jake checked his watch. He should be here any minute. Sure enough, a man in a gray suit approached our table, middle-aged, balding, carrying a leather portfolio. "Dad, this is Mr. Harmon," Jake said, standing to shake the man's hand. "He's a family financial advisor who's been helping Amanda and me organize our affairs." Mr. Harmon extended his hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Richardson. I've heard so much about you and your beautiful property." Something about his demeanor struck me as odd. He didn't have the polished confidence of a financial advisor. As we ordered dessert and coffee, Jake began what sounded like a rehearsed speech. "Dad, Amanda and I have been thinking a lot about family legacy since the wedding, about preserving what Mom's family built for generations to come." Amanda nodded earnestly. "We know how important Bluebell Ranch is to this family's history." Jake continued. "The thing is, Dad, at your age, managing such a large property must be overwhelming. All that responsibility, the physical demands, the financial complexities. I manage just fine," I said quietly, watching Mr. Harmon discreetly remove papers from his portfolio. "Of course you do." Amanda jumped in smoothly. "But wouldn't it be nice to have some help? To know that everything is secure for the future?" Jake reached over to pat my hand. "That's why we've created a family trust. It's a way to protect the ranch and ensure it stays in the family forever." Mr. Harmon slid several documents across the table. "It's quite straightforward, Mr. Richardson. This arrangement would transfer management control of the property to Jake and Amanda while guaranteeing you lifetime residency and income." I glanced at the papers without touching them. Bold words jumped out. Transfer of assets, management authority, successor trustee. "I see," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "And why exactly would I want to do this?" Jake leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Dad, Mom would have wanted this. The ranch should be managed by the next generation. It's my birthright through Mom's family. There it was, the confirmation of what I had suspected all along. Jake believed or had convinced himself that he had inherited Bluebell Ranch through Catherine. Amanda's smile became more strained. We have wonderful plans, Dalton. Ways to honor the property's heritage while ensuring it remains financially viable. Development opportunities, Mr. Harmon added helpfully. Luxury vacation homes on small parcels would generate significant revenue while preserving the core ranch operations. Jake pulled out an expensive pen and pushed it toward me along with the documents. His face glowed with what he clearly thought was a triumphant moment. This is for the best, Dad. We'll take care of everything. You won't have to worry about a thing for the rest of your life. His proud smile was so confident, so assured of success, that for a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The ranch isn't part of your inheritance, son, I said quietly. Your mother left it solely to me. Jake's proud smile froze, then slowly faded into confusion. What are you talking about? Mom's family land passes through the bloodline. That's how it's always worked. Not this time, I said, reaching into my jacket to pull out a folded copy of Catherine's will that Bill had prepared for me. Catherine was very specific about her wishes. Amanda's reaction was immediate and revealing. The mask of caring daughter-in-law vanished, replaced by cold calculation. How much? She demanded, her voice suddenly sharp. How much is the ranch worth exactly? Jake seemed caught off guard by both my revelation and his wife's reaction. Amanda, wait, I don't understand. Dad, there must be a mistake. I passed the will across the table. No mistake, Jake. Your mother left you $500,000 in the Colorado vacation property, which I notice you sold immediately. She left the ranch to me, with explicit instructions about its preservation. Mr. Harmon, looking increasingly uncomfortable, began gathering his papers. Perhaps this isn't the right time for these discussions. Who are you really? I asked him directly. Because you're not a financial advisor. He had the grace to look embarrassed. I'm a notary public. I was asked to witness signatures on these documents. A notary, I repeated, looking at Jake. You brought a notary to trick me into signing over the ranch. Jake at least had the decency to look ashamed, but Amanda was already shifting to attack mode. This is ridiculous, she snapped. That land has been in Jake's family for generations. You're just a husband who got lucky. It should rightfully go to Jake as Catherine's son and heir. I stood up slowly, placing enough cash on the table to cover the expensive meal. I think we're done here. Mr. Harmon, I suggest you find more ethical clients in the future. As I turned to leave, Jake grabbed my arm. Dad, wait. We need to talk about this. There has to be a way to work things out. The hurt in his eyes seemed genuine, but I'd seen enough. We'll talk when you're ready to be honest with me. You know where to find me. I walked out of the restaurant into the cool Montana evening, called a taxi, and left my son and his wife sitting with their failed scheme and a notary who probably wished he'd never agreed to their plan. The taxi dropped me at the ranch, but I couldn't bring myself to go inside the house yet. Instead, I walked to Catherine's favorite spot, a small rise overlooking the eastern pastures, where the first light of dawn would break each morning. We'd often sit there together, in comfortable silence, watching the day begin. You were right, Catherine, I whispered to the night air. You saw something in Jake that I didn't want to see. I heard the crunch of tires on gravel about an hour later. Headlights swept across the property as Jake's rental car pulled up. I stayed where I was, giving myself time to compose my thoughts. Voices carried through the still night, Amanda's sharp and angry, Jake's defensive and confused. I made my way back to the house just as they burst through the front door. Amanda was beyond pretense now, her beautiful face contorted with rage. $15 million, she shouted, waving her phone. That's what the real estate assessment says this property is worth. $15 million that should be rightfully Jake's. Jake looked torn, caught between his wife's fury and his own confusion. Dad, why didn't you tell me about Mom's will? All these years, I thought the ranch would come to me eventually. Your mother told you her decision before she died, I said, keeping my voice level. She made it clear that you had no interest in preserving the ranch. You told her yourself you'd likely sell to developers. That was years ago. Jake protested. Things change. Do they? I asked quietly. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you and Amanda were planning to do exactly that, parcel out the ranch for luxury vacation homes, the moment you got control. Amanda paced the worn carpet of our family living room, looking out of place in her expensive dress and jewelry. This is absurd. We're talking about Jake's legacy, his birthright. It was never about birthright, I told her. It was about stewardship. Catherine chose who she believed would best protect what her family built. And she chose you over her own son? Amanda's voice dripped with disbelief. Yes, I said simply. She did. Jake sank onto the couch, running his hands through his hair. I could see he was genuinely struggling with this revelation. There must be some way to contest the will, Amanda said, more to herself than to us. Undue influence, diminished capacity something. That's when I felt the full weight of the betrayal. They weren't just trying to manage the property. They were actively looking for ways to invalidate Catherine's wishes, to challenge her sound mind and judgment. Catherine was of perfectly sound mind when she made her will, I said, my voice hardening, and there were multiple witnesses, including her doctor and attorney. Jake looked up at me, his expression shifting between anger and desperation. Dad, be reasonable. We're family. We can work something out, can't we? Maybe a partial transfer? Or a co-ownership arrangement? Before I could answer, Amanda rounded on Jake. Don't beg him. This isn't right, and you know it. He's keeping what should be yours, our future. Then she turned to me, her mask completely gone. Do you have any idea what this property could be worth with proper development? The right luxury homes could triple its value. Jake deserves that opportunity. Amanda, Jake warned, but she was too far gone. No, he needs to hear this. We have plans, Dalton. Big plans. Jake and I are in debt up to our eyeballs from the wedding, my shopping spree, and the new condo. We need this land. If you loved your son, you'd sign it over. The revelation hung in the air between us. Financial troubles. Debt. This wasn't about family legacy at all. You married my son for his inheritance? I asked quietly. Amanda's face flushed. I married Jake because I love him. The inheritance was supposed to be our foundation, our future. Jake stood up suddenly. Stop talking, Amanda. Just stop. But she couldn't seem to help herself. You told me your mother's family ranch would come to you. You said we'd be set for life. That was the plan. Jake's face crumpled. For the first time, I saw him truly understand what was happening. The woman he'd married had been calculating values and returns from the very beginning. Is that true, Amanda? He asked, his voice barely audible. Would you have married me without the ranch? Her silence was answer enough. I think you both should leave, I said firmly. We all need time to think. Amanda grabbed her purse. This isn't over. We'll contest the will. We'll fight for what's rightfully Jake's. She stormed out to the car. Jake lingered, looking lost in the home where he'd grown up. Dad, he began, but seemed unable to find the words. Go on, son, I told him. We'll talk when things have cooled down. He nodded mutely and followed his wife outside. As their car disappeared down the driveway, I felt a profound sadness settle over me. Whatever happened next, our relationship would never be the same. The notary, Mr. Harmon, called me the next morning, profusely apologetic. Mr. Richardson, I had no idea about the circumstances. They told me this was a standard family asset protection arrangement with everyone in agreement. It's not your fault, I assured him. But I'd appreciate it if you'd make a record of what happened. Already done, he said. And sir, if this goes to court, I'll testify to what I witnessed. Little did I know how prophetic those words would prove to be. True to Amanda's threat, a certified letter arrived 3 weeks later from Preston and Associates, the law firm run by Amanda's father. It contained notice of a legal action contesting Catherine's will on grounds of undue influence and questioning my capacity to manage such substantial assets at my advanced age. Most painful was the additional filing, a petition for a competency hearing that could potentially lead to conservatorship over my affairs. My own son was claiming I might be mentally unfit to manage my property. I called Bill immediately. He was outraged but not surprised. "Unfortunately, this is becoming common," he said grimly. "Adult children trying to gain control of parents' assets through guardianship proceedings. The good news is, we have plenty of evidence of your competence and Catherine's clear intentions." News travels fast in small communities. Within days, people throughout the county knew about Jake and Amanda's lawsuit. To my surprise and gratitude, support poured in from unexpected places. Ranch hands, neighbors, local business owners, and Catherine's old friends all reached out to offer help. Earl and the other longtime employees were particularly vocal. "We'll all testify for you, boss," Earl promised. "We've seen you run this place better than anyone could." Catherine's best friend, Sarah Johnson, brought over a box of letters Catherine had written during her illness. "She wrote to me about her decisions," Sarah explained, "about why she left the ranch to you. These might help your case." Even more surprising was a visit from Thomas at the county records office. "Been doing some digging," he said over coffee at my kitchen table. "That daughter-in-law of yours has a history. Found records of a previous engagement to an older gentleman in Connecticut, wealthy real estate developer. Relationship ended abruptly after questions about missing funds and altered documents." "You're kidding," I said, shocked. Thomas shook his head. "Gave the information to your lawyer already. Might not be admissible in court, but it shows a pattern." The legal process ground forward with painful slowness. Depositions, filings, and motions filled the next few months. Amanda's father pulled every legal trick possible to drag things out, presumably running up my legal bills in hopes I'd settle. The deposition was the hardest part. Sitting across from Jake in a sterile conference room while he avoided my eyes as his lawyer asked increasingly insulting questions about my mental state. "Mr. Richardson, do you sometimes forget where you put things? Mr. Richardson, have you ever become disoriented while driving? Mr. Richardson, who manages the financial aspects of the ranch operations?" Each question designed to paint me as a confused old man, incapable of managing my affairs. The strategy was as transparent as it was hurtful. The stress began to take a physical toll. I developed high blood pressure, something I'd never had before. One night, after a particularly difficult day reviewing financial documents for the case, I experienced chest pains severe enough that Earl insisted on driving me to the emergency room. It wasn't a heart attack, thankfully, just stress-induced angina, but the doctor ordered me to rest and avoid stressful situations as much as possible. I laughed bitterly at that advice. The hospital stay had one unexpected consequence. Jake came to visit, alone. He stood awkwardly in the doorway of my hospital room, looking thinner and more haggard than I'd ever seen him. "The ranch manager called me," he explained. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'll live," I said, unsure how to feel about his presence. Jake sat in the visitor's chair, staring at his hands. "This isn't how I wanted things to go, Dad. And yet, here we are," I replied, "with you trying to declare me incompetent." "That was Amanda's idea, and her father's," he said quickly. "I never wanted that part." "But you're going along with it," I pointed out. "Your name is on the filing, Jake." He had no answer for that. We sat in uncomfortable silence until a nurse came in to check my vitals. After she left, I decided to try a different approach. "Come by the ranch tomorrow. There's something I want to show you." Jake looked surprised but nodded. "Okay, around noon?" The next day, true to his word, Jake arrived at the ranch alone. I had Earl bring out the old family videos and photos Catherine had meticulously organized before her death. We sat in the living room watching footage of Jake, growing up on the ranch holidays, birthdays, ordinary moments preserved on film. "Your mother spent her last months organizing these," I told him. "She wanted to make sure you'd have these memories." Jake watched, transfixed, as his younger self learned to ride a horse with Catherine patiently leading him around the corral. "I'd forgotten so much of this," he murmured. Then I showed him the letters Catherine had written specifically for Jake, but never sent. In them, she explained her decision about the ranch in detail, her concerns about preservation, her hope that he would understand someday, her love for him despite their different paths in life. "She wanted to protect the land and your future in the way she thought best," I explained. "She knew you had other dreams, and she respected that. That's why she left you the money and the Colorado property instead." I could see the conflict in Jake's eyes as he read his mother's words. For perhaps the first time, he was seeing the situation through her eyes rather than Amanda's. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out a document Bill had helped me prepare. "Catherine's sister Elizabeth is willing to testify about conversations she had with Catherine about her wishes for the ranch. She's flying in next week." Jake looked up sharply. "Aunt Liz is coming to testify?" I nodded. "She and several others who were close to your mother in her final years." Something shifted in Jake's expression. His aunt had always been straight with him, and he respected her opinion. If she confirmed what I was saying, our conversation was interrupted by the insistent ringing of Jake's phone. Amanda's name flashed on the screen. He silenced it without answering. "I need to think about all this," he said, gathering up the letters. "Take your time," I told him. "The truth isn't going anywhere." 3 days later, Bill called with surprising news. Jake had contacted him directly, asking for a meeting without lawyers present. After consulting with me, Bill agreed. That meeting led to another, this time with Jake, Bill, and me. Jake looked exhausted and defeated. "I want to withdraw from the lawsuit," he said simply. "I've been talking with Aunt Liz. She confirmed everything about Mom's wishes." "What about Amanda?" I asked cautiously. Jake's expression hardened. "We're separating. She's not who I thought she was." The judge was unimpressed with Amanda and Harold Preston's continued attempts to pursue the case without Jake's participation. After reviewing evidence from Catherine's sister, her doctor, and her attorney, he dismissed all claims against the estate and issued a strongly worded rebuke to the Prestons for bringing what he termed a frivolous and potentially exploitative case. I should have felt only relief and vindication, but the victory was hollow. My relationship with my son lay in ruins, and there was one final betrayal to discover. A week after the case was dismissed, Earl came to me with disturbing news. Several family heirlooms, Catherine's grandmother's silver service, her father's antique pocket watch, and a valuable painting of the ranch were missing from the storage area where we kept them. "I hate to say it, boss, but they disappeared right after Jake was here looking through those boxes of family photos." I contacted Jake, who eventually admitted he had taken the items and sold them to pay his mounting legal fees and debts. "I was desperate, Dad," he said, unable to meet my eyes. "Amanda left me with nothing but bills. That was the moment I made the hardest decision of my life. With Bill's help, I formally disinherited Jake from my will and created an irrevocable trust that would convert Bluebell Ranch into a conservation easement after my death, permanently protecting it from development. Catherine would understand," Bill assured me as I signed the documents with a heavy heart. "You're honoring her wishes in the best way possible." I hoped he was right. 6 months passed. Winter came and went, and spring returned to Bluebell Ranch. I settled into a quieter life, finding purpose in running the ranch with Earl and the other loyal hands. The legal battle had taken its toll on my health, but daily work in the fresh air gradually restored my strength. News reached me through mutual acquaintances that Jake and Amanda's divorce had been finalized. She had apparently moved on quickly, already engaged to a real estate developer in Florida. Jake had moved out of their expensive Chicago condo and taken a job with a smaller firm in Missoula, just a few hours from the ranch. I thought about calling him many times, but always hesitated. The wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too deep. Instead, I focused on implementing the conservation plans Catherine and I had discussed years ago. I worked with environmental experts to establish wildlife corridors and restore native grasslands on parts of the property. Then one spring afternoon, a battered pickup truck I didn't recognize came bouncing up the driveway. I was fixing a fence in the front pasture and straightened up, shielding my eyes against the Sunday. The truck stopped, and Jake stepped out. He looked different, thinner, tanned from outdoor work, dressed in worn jeans and a flannel shirt instead of his usual designer clothes. For a moment, he reminded me so much of myself at his age that it took my breath away. "Dad," he said simply, walking toward me with his hands in his pockets. "Jake," I replied cautiously. "This is a surprise." He looked around at the ranch, taking in the snow-capped mountains in the distance, the green pastures, the grazing cattle. "Place looks good." "It's been a good spring," I allowed. An awkward silence stretched between us. Finally, Jake took a deep breath. "I came to apologize," he said, looking me directly in the eyes for the first time. "What I did was unforgivable. I let greed and Amanda's influence cloud my judgment. I betrayed you and Mom both." His sincerity was unmistakable. Still, I'd been fooled before. "What do you want, Jake?" I asked bluntly. "Nothing," he replied quickly. "I'm not here to ask for money, or property, or forgiveness. I just needed to tell you face to face how sorry I am." He turned to go, but I wasn't ready to let him leave yet. "Wait," I called. "Tell me what you've been doing these past months." Jake stopped and turned back. "Working construction in Missoula, starting over from scratch, trying to figure out who I am without all the trappings." "Construction?" I couldn't hide my surprise. Jake had always avoided physical labor. A small smile touched his lips. "Yeah, turns out I'm pretty good with my hands when I actually try. Got promoted to crew leader last month." We talked for another hour, standing there by the fence line. Jake told me about his divorce, about the hard lessons he'd learned, about his struggle to pay off the massive debt Amanda had accumulated. "I sold everything," he explained. "The watch, the condo furniture, my car. Started fresh with nothing but what I could fit in that truck." As the sun began to set, I made a decision. "Are you hungry? Earl makes a mean beef stew on Thursdays." Jake looked surprised but nodded. "I'd like that." Over dinner with Earl and a couple of the other ranch hands, I watched Jake interact with these men who had known him since childhood. There was an authenticity to him I hadn't seen in years, a humility that reminded me of the boy he'd been before ambition and greed took hold. After the others turned in for the night, Jake and I sat on the porch with cups of coffee. "I should head back to Missoula," he said, but made no move to leave. "It's a long drive," I observed. "You could stay the night if you want. Your old room is still there." Jake stared into his coffee cup. "I don't deserve that kindness." "Probably not," I agreed, "but it's there all the same." The next morning over breakfast, I made him an offer. The south pasture fence needs replacing. It's a 2-week job at least. Earl's short-handed since Tim retired. Jake looked up from his eggs. "Are you offering me a job?" "Minimum wage, bunkhouse accommodation with the other hands. No special treatment," I said firmly. "You'd work under Earl's supervision." "Why would you do that after everything I did?" I considered the question carefully. "Because your mother would want me to give you a chance to make amends, not with money or property, but with honest work." Jake thought about it for a long moment. "When do I start?" "Today, if you want." He nodded slowly. "I want to." That was the beginning of a long, difficult journey toward reconciliation. Jake moved into the bunkhouse with the other ranch hands, worked the same long hours, ate the same simple meals. At first, Earl watched him like a hawk, skeptical of his commitment. But as weeks turned into months, Jake earned respect through consistent, hard work. I kept my distance emotionally, protecting myself from further disappointment. But gradually, as I watched Jake throw himself into ranch work, learning the skills his mother had tried to teach him years ago, something began to heal between us. We didn't talk about the lawsuit or Amanda. Instead, our conversations centered around the daily operations of the ranch, the cattle, the land. I began sharing Catherine's vision for Bluebell, the conservation efforts she had planned. To my surprise, Jake took a genuine interest. He started reading books on sustainable ranching and wildlife management during his evening hours. 6 months into his employment, he came to me with thoughtful suggestions for improving our water conservation methods. "Mom would have liked this idea," he said tentatively, showing me his detailed plans. "Yes," I agreed, studying his work. "She would have." By then, I had already decided to create a conservation trust for Bluebell Ranch, rather than leaving it to any individual. Working with environmental organizations and the Montana Land Reliance, I established a framework that would ensure the property remained undeveloped and true to Catherine's vision, regardless of who managed it in the future. When I explained this to Jake, he nodded in understanding. It's the right thing to do. This place deserves to be protected. After a year of working on the ranch, Jake introduced me to Abigail, a local veterinarian he'd met when one of our horses needed treatment. Unlike Amanda, Abigail was unpretentious and genuinely passionate about animals and conservation. She loved the ranch for what it was, not for its monetary value. Watching them together, seeing Jake through her eyes, helped me recognize how much he had changed. The materialistic, status-conscious man he'd become in Chicago had been replaced by someone more reminiscent of the thoughtful boy Catherine and I had raised. One evening, as we finished mending a fence line together, Jake paused to watch the sunset painting the mountains gold and purple. "I get it now," he said quietly. "What Mom saw in this place, what you see." I nodded, understanding what he meant. "It's not about ownership. It's about stewardship," he finished. "Taking care of something that will outlast all of us." That simple exchange healed something profound between us. Jake would never be the owner of Bluebell Ranch, but he had found his place here all the same as a caretaker, just as Catherine had been, and her parents before her. The ranch will continue long after I'm gone, protected by the trust Catherine inspired and Jake came to understand. Sometimes I think she knew how things would unfold, knew that Jake needed to lose his way before he could truly appreciate what she valued. By staying quiet about my inheritance at Jake's wedding, I ultimately saved both the ranch and my relationship with my son. Not in the way I expected, but in the way Catherine might have foreseen a difficult journey toward wisdom and reconciliation. So I ask you, have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect something valuable, only to discover it led to unexpected healing? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this tale of family, betrayal, and redemption resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps me continue sharing these life lessons from my many years on this earth. Thank you for listening, and may you find the wisdom to protect what matters most in your own life.